Okay, in this video we are going to talk about adding an inventory part number, and we're going to go through a detailed description of every single field on that, which is a pretty long record, so bear with me. So first off, we're going to go to number 4 on the menu, and then from there it's number 16. That's where we generate a brand new part. So when I go to 16, it asks for store number, and by hitting return we're defaulting to space for store number. That's the main branch. So, and you'll note that this inventory has 885,000 records in that file. It's a huge file, and you figure each store has about 200,000 part numbers. So that being said, I'm going to go over the 3 different options for an alpha scan. If I do a question mark 10 dash, it's going to pull up all the part numbers that start with a 10 dash, and if I hit return and keep going, now if the part number supersedes, here's one part number, and it supersedes, if it's indented, it supersedes to this part number, and then this is showing the store or branch that that part number belongs to. So let's get a little bit further down here. So what you're seeing is here's a part number, and there's no branch here, which means that's the main branch, and then there's store number 10, store number 14, store number 15, etc. And then we have a quantity on hand and quantity available for each store. So quantity available is made up of quantity on hand plus quantity on order from the PO system minus quantity committed through the customer sales order system. So that being said, I'm just going to hit return a couple more times, and while I'm in this window, if I do an X at the bottom, I get to go backwards. An X again, and I go backwards. The indentation for the supersession doesn't work there when you're going backwards, but because we're doing a reverse sequential. I'm going to type in end. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a question mark space, and if you're looking down at the bottom line here, like the question mark XXX was question mark 10 dash, but a question mark space XX means question mark space PUMP, and instead of looking up, the last window I did was question mark 10 dash, by doing a question mark space, we're saying, hey, I want to look it up by description, not by product code. So I'm going to grab this first part number here. I'm going to copy the part number. Remember that 114245, copy. And I'm going to go to number 8. And the thing about the alpha field, when I go to field number 4, this is 30 characters long. And this alpha scan field is only 10 characters long, but it's an exact copy of the first 10 characters of that description field. So I'm going to change it to my initials. Now remember this 114245 number. I'm doing a question mark space PUMP, and that 114245 is gone. And the reason it's gone is if I do a question mark FMC, question mark space FMC, and then you'll see that same part number here. In fact, the one I did before in my other demo. So if I go up to number 2 and go to field number 5, it copies the first 10 characters, and we're done. I have to pause a minute so I can cough. Okay, now that my coughing spasm is over, so we've got that part number put back to normal. And so now I'm just going to hit return, and boom, it's gone. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a part number, and I'm going to describe every field that we're doing and what that field is all about. So if I just do a question mark, question mark, that opens up a help screen and says, hey, what is that field looking for? Okay, and it's basically talking about the alpha scan, etc. So I'm just going to give it a part number, 40-3005 -00. And I'm going to call it a starter. Oops. X return goes back. STARTER. Product category. If I do a CT, that pulls up carrier transit code. And you don't have to put in the vendor here, but the vendor number here is 1000. And that is also carrier transit code. And alternate product code 1 is used for superseding. So if this part number was to supersede to another part number, you would put the new and improved part number here. So then when you saw that before, it would show this, it would indent, and then it would say go to this part number. I'm going to leave it blank for now. That supersede from, we have a program that goes back and looks at the supersessions and does a reverse lookup that way. Comments is exactly what it means. Warranty days. That part you might warranty because it's a rebuilt starter for 90 days. Overriding tax code. We use this for, like, we set up mechanics in here and labor is non-taxable. So we have in the system, if it's left blank, it's considered taxable. But like an N or a L for labor is non-taxable. And I'm just going to hit return for a regular part number. Override sales order GL number. We only use this on labor items and things that you want to force that GL number. There is a hierarchy. I'll get into that a little bit later. Same thing, this is your cost of goods or your PO GL number. Shipping weight, and we use that at the bottom of an invoice. If you have weights in here, we'll give you the total weight of all the part numbers. We have list price, and I'm going to say $49.95. Okay, percentage to check from list. This is important, and I did that in the other video. I'm going to say 30%. And what that means is, actually, I might have that backwards. Let me check. Yeah, I believe it's a 0.30. 0.30%. And what that means is, if when I'm keying in a sell price on an invoice, if I'm over or under this by 30%, to do a beep and flag that record. You know, when you're doing Flight of the Bumblebee and you're doing invoicing, it's real easy to drop a digit or to add a digit. And so by putting that on the record, that's what we're really saying by that 30% flag. Okay, minimum quantity on hand and maximum quantity on hand. We only recommend using those if you have a brand new part and you don't have any history for it. Because we have a, in the inventory reorder, we look at the last 12 months usage. We actually only look at 6 months. That way we're covering seasonal. And you have to sell 2 in a 6-month window before we even tell you to stock one. Some places require that to be a dealer you have to stock certain parts. But on a brand new part, it's okay to put in min-max level, and a year from then, I would tell you to zero them out. But if your quantity on hand drops below a minimum, of course, it's going to tell you to reorder one. And same thing with your max. Standard quantity to reorder. Sometimes you have to order 10, like a pallet of something. And it jumps right to cost. Now, this is something very special. Let's see, we had a $49.95, so let's just say $30. And $30. Now and basically that's all it asks you to set up a part. But I like to make sure that you have your physical beginning date, or you can even put the date of the physical being today's date. So let's just say 11/08/2017. Beginning price of $30, and quantity is okay to be 0. Because What this does, this gives it a starting point. When the system goes through and recalculates your inventory, it says start here, start at this price, and start at this quantity. And then add up all the purchases after that, back out all your sales, and come up with a weighted average cost. And it's based on daily average. Okay, so that being said, the other thing I want to talk about, there are 4 cost fields here. Weighted average, which I'm going to tell you don't even bother putting anything there because the system will override it every single day. Cost most recent, I'm going to tell you don't bother putting that in because every time the system does a recompute, it will put the latest PO's cost in there. But when we do a price update, these fields never ever change until we do a price update. And what this is for, this is like list price. Remember we put $49.95 as list price on the other screen. On the PO system, this is what automatically displays for your price when you do a line item of a purchase order. It says, oh, that cost me $30, so that's when you do a PO, we're saying it should cost $30. This field, however, is used for when we're doing a work order or a sales order, and you're at price and you do a percent sign. I want to have a 25% margin. Now think of it this way. You might buy somebody's inventory 10 cents on a dollar, and so you got it real cheap. But you don't want to give that away if we're doing a cost plus scenario. Let's say that you bought this for $5 in a one of those inventory close blowout sales. And of course I lost my part number. Talking too much. Well, let's do this. I'm just going to pull up another part number. The reason we do that, we have a 2-minute timeout. Because if somebody sat on a part number and went to lunch, they're locking that record. So anyone else in a multi-user system, like let's say you got 100 users, no one else can touch that part number. And when you're doing that, it's like McDonald's cheeseburger and a Coke. You don't want to lock up that record. So I'm just going to, because I lost that record, it timed out on me. This cost plus, I'll go back to that 10 cents on a dollar. Let's say you bought this for $5 at a garage sale. We don't necessarily want to pass that on to a customer when you're selling it. So we have a book value of $16.44, which is the same thing of what it would cost to buy it new. But if you bought somebody's inventory 10 cents on a dollar, that's going to have that cost here in weighted average. But on a sales order or work order, if you do a percent sign and 25%, it's going to take that number and divide it by 0.75, giving you a 25% margin off of this part, or this cost, rather than the deeply discounted 10 cents on a dollar cost. In other words, the customer shouldn't benefit for you having getting a good deal on something, is bottom line. Okay, one other thing. Let's see. I'm going to go back to this for a couple of issues. Oh, bin location. This is where is it on your shelf. This is only a 5-digit field. So don't try to go beyond that. But think of it as this. The first, I'm going to go to the next field so I don't trash this. The first 3 digits should be your bin. Floor to ceiling, it's like a locker. And then your shelf, A, B, C, D, etc. And so, you know, and maybe a second floor should be your 200 series, or a different warehouse, like you might have an empty truck trailer out back that you use for inventory storage, and that might be 300 series. So you have up to 3 separate bin locations for the same part number. And the reason being, like, you might buy filters by the pallet, and you keep enough of them up front right by the parts counter, even though in the back you got tons of them. because you get a better price buying them in bulk. Let's see. The other thing is we can have a sale price of, let's say, $25 that only works for this date range to 36 11 15 2017. So by doing that, as long as the system date is within that date range, they'll get that price of $25. Okay, last sales order number. This gets, every night there's a system run and it stamps the last sales order number and the last PO number and the dates on each one of these. Date of the last change is the last time I pulled up this record, which is today. This pricing method is just like we did in on the inventory category. In fact, I'll show you how to mass load that on the next video, but basically if we say that category of CT, we want to slam all the CT part numbers with this method, it'll go out there and hit all 40,000 part numbers with that percent sign. Now, this pricing category here is a subcategory of CT, and I'll give you an example. We might have CT and we have a 40% margin on all the parts, but cores we don't discount. So we would put a CR here for cores. Oops. 41 and type in a CR. And we have an ability to go through and mass hit all the cores so they don't get discounted. And here's something else that's really important. Number 16, this has a lot of different options. And I'm just going to do a question mark here to show you. An N means it's a non-stocking item. And that means the quantity on hand will always be 0. An I is an inactive part number, pretty well tells its own story. You can't delete stuff that has history. So we can, merge it under a different store or something so it's not in your face. P equals pseudo, and you might have 3 different part numbers, but you might only stock them under one. So that's what pseudo means. It means to pretend to bill this number, but subtract the quantity on hand from a different number. And the way that works, that P uses your alternate product code as the real number to subtract. So you might invoice under one part number, it looks at the alternate product code and then says subtract the quantity on hand from that part number. An M means this part number has no mathematical function. It's there for a memo inventory item only. You can charge it out on an invoice. It will not add to any of the dollars and cents. And an A, this is pretty important. I have this in that core video where when you're setting up a core, this is where you would say, I want to automatically bill the alternate product code on there. So if I buy a starter and under alternate product code I have the starter core, on that starter part number I'll put in the quantity and, or not a quantity, I'll put in the part number and an A, which means also in addition to that one part number, bill this next item. See the core setup on the training videos and it'll have a detailed explanation. Okay, so these are just detailed descriptions of each one. One other thing here too that's kind of interesting. Let's see. Fractional quantity. All of our part numbers default to a full integer or a whole number. You can't key in 1.75. It can only be 1 or 2. If you say like if you put anything in here like QTS for quartz, it will, alongside of the quantity, put that description, and it will allow you to do like 0.25, or as an example, we set up the mechanics and we have hours. So by putting something in here allows them to key in a fractional portion of that number, like 1.75. One other thing, print OSHA memo. If I answer yes to that, and I'll show you this, that means we have a memo system, and whatever's in that memo, in other words, if it's hazardous waste, you can put in a paragraph. So every time you invoice this part number, that paragraph will automatically print out right underneath that part number. And field 68, oops, you remember that window where we said, well, where can I get some? This says, hey, I want to advertise this part number in the bigger scheme of things. So if you have slow moving parts you want to advertise, just answer yes to that, and our system will pick it up and put it out on the digital network amongst the dealers and advertise that product. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, one other thing too. I'm kind of jumping around here, so bear with me. Whoops. I'm going to go up to field 37. So I can have a new list price set up in advance. So instead of, I could say $45, and my list price is 02012018. So when the date automatically comes, my list price will automatically default to that. Okay, so I'm just going to hit return, and well, that kind of blew that one out of the water. But anyway, that was pretty much all that's involved in the inventory screen, and I'll do some more stuff in addition to this, but that's a pretty good overview of what happens. So thanks for watching. Take care.